picked the first rainy day of the spring, I think. It's been a beautiful season with blooming flowers and blue skies. A spring not unlike that fateful spring of 150 years ago, on the eve of the great struggle to uphold constitutional principle and to establish a new and independent Southern nation. A nation composed of 11 states, recently withdrawn from the old Union and seeking to go their own way in peace. In that spring of 1861, the sun shone brightly, the earth turned green once again. But black clouds were rapidly gathering, the clouds of what proved to be a 4-year-long ordeal, more terrible than Americans had ever known or would ever know again. Those 4 dreadful years witnessed the violent deaths of 620,000 Americans in a bloody conflict that might have been avoided but for the lust for dominion of those who, in pursuit of political and economic domination, refused to allow their sister states to depart the Union in peace. Those 11 states that believed that the federal government was usurping powers not granted by the founding documents of the nation invoked the principles of the Constitution and of the Declaration of Independence in their stated reasons for secession. In the words of our founding fathers, the declared purpose of the American Union had been to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. And when, in the judgment of the sovereign people, the government becomes destructive of those ends, the people have the right to alter or abolish it. The people of the southern states judged this to be the case, and recognizing that government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed, the southern people resorted to the ballot box. They voted in each state for delegates to gather in conventions assembled to decide whether to remain in the Union or to withdraw from it. This was a right implied by the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which states that those powers not specifically given to the states, not specifically given to the federal government, are reserved to the states and to the people. The people's elected representatives in 11 southern states voted to separate their states from the Union. Later, they voted for a new nation. The newborn Confederacy sought to go its way in peace, sought dominion over no other nation, sought benign diplomatic ties and free trade with all nations. The new country was based on common heritage and common interest. Its constitution echoed in almost all particulars that of the old Union. They were Americans, and never more American than when they resisted the overweening power and encroachments of an expanding federal government. The seceding states sought only to separate peacefully, but that right was denied them. War was forced on them, and when war came, it was a war of conquest and subjugation. It was not a civil war. Only the abuse of language calls it such. In a civil war, 2 parties are contesting within a single nation for control of one central government. At no time did the Confederacy seek to control the Union or to move its seat to Washington. This was a struggle for Southern independence with malice toward none. But when the leader of the North called for 75,000 troops to invade the southern states and drag them back into the Union by force, the Southern people responded to the threat. From farm and village, from city and countryside, from every class of citizenry, they came. The aged, the young, often lying about their ages to share in the honor of service, they came. The vast majority were men of the soil, far from privilege, but proud and obstinate, in love with their native land and with the liberties their fathers had bequeathed to them. They fought a tyranny that refused to simply leave them alone. An army that invaded their country, laid waste their fields, burned their cities, homes, and farms, stole their property, and cut a broad swath of destruction across the once verdant Southland. And those invaders rejoiced in the devastation they wrought. One general boasted that when he gets through with the fertile garden that was the Shenandoah Valley, quote, a crow flying across it would have to carry its own lunch, unquote. Another general, who will remain nameless in this sacred place, declared, "I will make Georgia howl," and suited his actions to his savage words. He added South Carolina, burning Columbia, including my family's home, in an orgy of sadistic fury. And yet, when our armies marched north into Pennsylvania, someone said to our immortal General Lee, General, now we can wreak vengeance on our enemies and do to them what they did to us. General Lee was alarmed and issued a special order to his troops. Soldiers, we make war only against armed men, nor dare we take vengeance upon civilians, lest we risk offending him to whom vengeance belongeth. That was Robert E. Lee. That was the Southern soldier. In that war, the two contesting armies were reading from two distinct and opposed books of rules. One honorable and manly, the other a disgrace to civilized standards of engagement. Those Southern men fought on for 4 years, 4 terrible years, supported by their gallant women at home, who had to contend with savage invaders in their homes and farms. At first, the outnumbered Confederates hurled back the intruders with a fury born of devotion to duty and to their cause. But as the years and the fighting dragged on and on, the odds became overwhelming. Yet they fought on, without uniforms, without shoes, with dwindling ammunition, and close to starvation. And the enemy kept coming and coming, ever more and more, from the great population centers of the northern cities, armed with the products of cannon factories, munitions works, and manufacturing centers untouched by the war. An industrial giant with virtually unlimited resources was pitted against an agrarian society which was slowly being bled to death. How did we hold out for 4 years against the overwhelming might of the Union war machine? The answer to that question begins with a list of glorious names: Lee and Jackson, Stuart, Forrest, Pelham, Hampton, and other greats and near greats who led our troops. But in the end, it was the men themselves, the anonymous citizen soldiers, who at their country's call sprang to her defense. It was their indomitable spirit, their heroism, their selfless dedication to the cause of independence that led them on. We are truly, all of us, descended from giants. In a typical engagement, the Southern battle flag, our beloved Starry Cross, might change hands a dozen times. Every Southern soldier knew that every Yankee gun would be trained on the man or boy carrying the flag in the charge. And yet they vied for the honor of bearing it aloft. As one man fell, the next would snatch it up and bear it forward until he was hit, and the next hero took hold of it, and then the next and the next. When I visited the now silent battlefield at Malvern Hill, outside Richmond, where my great-great-grandfather served, I stood on the Yankee line and gazed down the sloping grassy field to the woods from which those ragged Southern boys came running on that long ago battle day. And for a moment, I could see them charging up the long slope, red and blue flags flying, their faces contorted, their eyes wild, their mouths wide open, shouting the rebel yell at the top of their lungs, burning, bursting with the thrill and exuberance of battle. And then the vision faded. And I thought of General Lee's words at Fredericksburg. It is well that war is so terrible, else we should grow too fond of it. I never tire of visiting those fields of carnage and glory on which our fathers fought, that today we honor them in this sacred place. May God bless and keep them all. He has long since received them, has long since bestowed upon them the peace denied them on earth. They achieved more than victory. They are immortal. They belong to the memory of man. But in a special sense, they belong to us, their descendants. It is we of the Sons of Confederate Veterans and the United Daughters of the Confederacy who have been charged, who have been privileged, in the words of President Davis, to keep the memory of our heroes green. In the next 4 years, you and I will be sorely tried as we attempt to keep their memories green and fresh and unsullied by the ignorant and the malevolent who would defame their legacy. The guns are silent, but the war of words goes on. We are the foot soldiers in that war. It is a battle for the honor of our fathers and our mothers. Let us so acquit ourselves in the upcoming struggle of ideas that our gallant dead may find us worthy to fight for them as they once fought for us. May our merciful Father bestow his blessings on all our heroes in gray and continue to grant them repose until the coming of that day when war will be no more and a great peace will embrace the world, and God will wipe away every tear, and death itself will die.